The NFL's game of musical chairs has finally started to take shape, and with some big names involved. On a busy Saturday night, the Atlanta Falcons sped up the process and struck a deal to make Kevin Stefanski their new head coach, marking the first major decision of the Martin Hill era as president of football. Meanwhile, in New York, the deal with John still hasn't been finalized, but it's already drawing attention across the league due to the unusual delay. Amid quick decisions, delicate negotiations, and high expectations, Coach Carroll has started
the NFL on Saturday night, where the Atlanta Falcons are finalizing a deal to make Kevin Stefanski their next head coach. Stefanski was a two-time NFL Coach of the Year in Cleveland, but was fired after this season after going 8-26 the last 2 years. He's replacing Raheem Morris in Atlanta, who went 16-18 in 2 years as the Falcons coach. This is the first big move for new president of football, Matt Ryan. In studio with the fellas to react, and I turn to lead NFL insider Jonathan Jones first. What can you tell us the function of how this came together, Kevin Stefanski and the Atlanta Falcons?
So, been a lot of conversations between Kevin Stefanski and new president of football, Matt Ryan. A lot of respect within that Atlanta Falcons organization for the job that Kevin Stefanski has done over the past several years with the Cleveland Browns. Obviously, this past season, when he had 4 quarterbacks but didn't really have one quarterback, certainly not holding against him the record there in Cleveland this past season. So this started to look like it could happen late this morning, and the Atlanta Falcons wanted to move quickly. Kevin Stefanski had some other interviews that were set up into the future. They didn't want him to get to those interviews. He arrived in Atlanta. They interviewed him, Matt Ryan, along with Greg Beatles, the team president, as well as Arthur Blank, Josh Blank, his son, who holds a VP title there, among other members of leadership with the Falcons. And they decided that they need Kevin Stefanski, who, as a head coach, he can be the offensive play caller. He can have an OC who calls plays. He did both while he was in Cleveland to varying degrees of success. And they believe that with the talent on offense, that they will be able to succeed in a very, very winnable NFC South. And lastly, at defensive coordinator, while they let some of their assistants under Raheem Morris interview other places, they said, no, you can't talk to Jeff Ulbrich, our defensive coordinator. It is very possible, if not likely, he will be retained as the defensive coordinator there in Atlanta.
A lot of pieces in place in Atlanta for Stefanski to work with some of those offensive weapons. But Mac, the murky water, still the quarterback position. JJ, you allude to even murkier waters there in Cleveland when it came to quarterback. How do you like this fit specifically for Michael Penix and his future? Or does it even speed up the clock where Stefanski might say, I got to see it, or I want one of my guys?
Well, I like this fit for Michael Penix because, to your point, you look at the success Kevin Stefanski had sparingly in Cleveland. He had a real good relationship with the quarterbacks. Now, the last 2 seasons, you can't really say the same thing. The last 2 seasons, he's won 8 games. So I feel like Atlanta, they're making this hire, basically telling us they believe it was more about the dysfunction that was around Kevin Stefanski than Kevin Stefanski as a head coach. So if you're Michael Penix, you get an opportunity to reset your clock over again. You get a fresh start. And I believe Kevin Stefanski accepted this opportunity knowing and believing he can get the most out of Michael Penix. Because if you come into this job for Atlanta, Michael Penix is going to be your quarterback for 2026. So you have to believe, based on this film you study, whatever it is that you viewed of Michael Penix, that, you know what, I see something in him. Yeah. Because there was a short moment when Baker Mayfield kind of unleashed his productivity while working with Kevin Stefanski. So maybe there's the same path for Michael Penix, seeing what he did with Baker Mayfield sparingly there in Cleveland. He can do some of the same things for him in Atlanta.
Stefanski and Baker now back in one another's proximity there in the South. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out in a division that has left us wanting more. How much do you think that factored into the decision for Stefanski, saying, I'm looking at the South, and if I could get this right at the quarterback position, we could take real hold of this thing?
I think that was a big part of it. You saw how the Falcons finished this year, and for a lot of people's estimations, it was a down year, an underperforming year for the Falcons. So for Kevin Stefanski, when you look at the makeup of the NFC South, you look at the makeup of the Atlanta Falcons roster, regardless of the timeline for Michael Penix and his return from the knee injury, you've got Kirk Cousins sitting behind him who Stefanski has some similarities with from their time in Minnesota. So there's some parallels there for Kevin Stefanski. He's got to be over the moon ecstatic about the roster that he's inherited. Bijan Robinson, Drake London. I don't know what they're going to do with Kyle Pitts, but they've got some weapons on offense. They've got a lot of weapons on defense. Yeah. Finished the year strong this year. So they seem to be a piece away in Atlanta and think it's the head coach. So it'll be interesting to see if this is the move that gets them over the top to where they want to go.
And a well-established offensive line. Caleb McGarry missed the entire season, but he will be healthy. You got Matthews, you got Lindstrom. You got some guys that can move people against their will on the offensive line.
Sometimes all you got to do is find that first domino and give it a push. The Harbaugh falls, then the Stefanski. This is sort of the order of operations we expected.
That's right.
What do we see next?
Isn't it funny how we were talking about how weak of a coaching candidate pool this was going to be, and then some guys got fired, and now all of a sudden the two dominoes that have fallen, well, they were just head coaches a couple of weeks ago, right? So that is in vogue, and that is what we are going to continue to see across the NFL. Be prepared to see far more second-timers, quote-unquote retreads, get head coaching jobs instead of these new hot up-and-comers. Now, we will still see some of those, but right now, leading candidates in certain places. You look with the Miami Dolphins, a zero-time NFL head coach, but previous college football head coach Jeff Hafley appears to be the leader there in Miami with John Eric Sullivan as general manager. They work together in Green Bay. You look at the Tennessee Titans. Stefanski was right there in the running to be one of the three finalists or so there. Matt Nagy may be the guy in Tennessee as we continue to look at that. Cleveland still trying to figure out what they're doing. Talk about Kevin Stefanski. Maybe that's a Mike McDaniel, who winds up there. And then lastly, talking about Atlanta, because they have Matt Ryan now as president of football. They have Kevin Stefanski as head coach. They have a general manager. And that GM, while not the primary football executive to the league office, is still going to be the GM in a lot of respects. They have to fill that position. A lot of people think it's going to be Ian Cunningham, the assistant general manager of the Chicago Bears. We'll see if that winds up taking place next week.
So that's the Iceman to Matty Ice, but business is done here in Atlanta for the first time as acting president of football. Matt Ryan identifies, and he gets his guy. It's Kevin Stefanski in Atlanta. A look here at the coaching carousel that has come to rest in two places. Stefanski to the Falcons. Harbaugh finally inking that deal earlier on Saturday, where he will be the new head coach of the football Giants. Cardinals, Titans, Browns, Dolphins, Raiders, Ravens, Steelers, not in that order, all.
Another key coaching note today, Greeny. Kevin Stefanski is headed to Atlanta later today for an in-person interview with the Falcons. It's his second interview, and the Falcons moved it up ahead of the Tennessee Titans on Sunday to jump the line so that they can get Stefanski in there to potentially try to get a deal done. So if the two sides can work out a deal, Kevin Stefanski...
Game headquarters with the coaching carousel. Schefter.
Well, Greeny, Steve Bisciotti's former coach, John Harbaugh, was finalizing an agreement with the New York Giants in the middle of the week. But here we are, Saturday morning, and that agreement still is not done. Now, John Harbaugh and the Giants both believe that they are going to get this agreement done. It's Saturday. There are games today, tomorrow, a national holiday on Monday, and the plan all along and hope has been to have a press conference on Tuesday to introduce John Harbaugh as the next head coach of the New York Giants. But here we are, some 72 hours later, and they're still haggling over the language of the contract. They've agreed on the money, but not the terms, not the way that it will lay out within the structure of the organization. They're going back and forth on it. It's a document over 40 pages that lawyers still are going through right now, combing through all the details. I will say it has caught the attention of people across the league. Many have called to say it is highly unusual and very peculiar that this deal still is not worked out. But I want to emphasize that both sides, the Harbaugh camp and the Giants, both still believe this is getting done. They believe they're at the goal line. They need to get it across, but they are not across yet.
All right, we'll see how they do in the red zone as they got to get this thing settled up there with Harbaugh. And, of course, look, if it goes sideways, that's an entirely other conversation. Let's live in a world where they do get this done, which remains, as Schefter said, the expectation. And now you bring in this veteran, experienced leader, CEO type of a coach with that young group. Rex, how good can they be and how quickly?
I think he'll flip it overnight. I really do. And look, they lost the Giants in 5 games this year, had double-digit leads and blew it. I think it's going to be interesting to see who his staff is. you're going to probably get an all-star staff, in my opinion, because you'll want to be with Harbaugh, I'm sure. And so that's going to be interesting. You're not only getting John Harbaugh, the leadership and all that, but he's also going to go out and probably hire the best coaches. All right, we'll see. But anyway, when I look at it, this team right here is so talented. All right, if you go in, to build a organization, you want to have a franchise-type quarterback. We'll see. I think they may have one right there. You want a franchise left tackle to protect that quarterback. Check that box. You want a franchise #1 receiver. You can check that box. Malik, yeah. And by the way, you got 5 guys that can absolutely rush the passer. You put the right guy in that situation, they may go to #1 in the league in defense. All right, so to me, I think absolutely this is a playoff team. Look, John Harbaugh, his first year, rookie head coach, had a rookie quarterback and went to a
With Steven in Atlanta, the Falcons make it clear they're betting on experience, structure, and the belief that their recent problems were circumstantial rather than technical. The roster, the context of the NFC South, and confidence in development, the quarterback points to a franchise that believes it's closer than it seems. Meanwhile, in New York, the imminent arrival of Johnson signals an immediate shift in culture and leadership, with the potential to make an almost instant impact. What seemed like a weak coaching market quickly turned into a race for established names. And if these first pieces have already fallen, the rest of the board promises even more decisive moves in the coming days.